And we're live. We're here with Bokov and Popular Liberty. We're going to continue our live reading of Jacques Maritain, The Three Reformers. We're going to focus on the Rousseau section today of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It'll be an exciting episode. Ironcast could not make it. He is not responding to text. We assume he is dead. So pour one out for the homie.
Yeah, prayers up, man.
He's up there right now with Aquinas, just living the dream.
Indeed, yeah.
He said, they're like, no, you see, physics. He's trying to talk.
My condolences to Mrs. Einkath and to his children.
He's up there with Ayn Rand, who mysteriously converted.
Saint Rand, ora pro nobis.
Yes, oh.
Ora pro nobis peccatoribus.
That is still
mortis nostra. Amen.
His troll of objectivism was that still like the greatest troll on Twitter, in my opinion.
It's so good.
No, she converted before she died. Didn't you hear this?
Oh man,
it's so good.
Oh, it was great. Now, should I get to the reading?
Let's do this.
All right. So, Rousseau or Nature's Saint. And we begin with two quotations. One from Matthew chapter 4, verse 3. Dic ut lapides isti panes fiant. In English, this would usually be translated, or more famously translated, as command that these stones be made bread. And if my husband is not a saint, who is? Thérèse. This was Rousseau's wife shortly after he died. Now, part 1, the saint. The angels, who see all the happenings of this universe in the creative ideas, know the philosophy of histories. Philosophers cannot know it, for history itself is not a science, since it has to do only with individual and contingent facts. It is a memory and an experience for the use of the prudent. And as to detecting the causes and supreme laws working through the stream of incident, to do that we should need to share the counsel of a supreme fashioner, or be directly enlightened by him. That is why it is properly a prophetic work to deliver men to a philosophy of history. Herder and Quinet, which were two philosophers at the time, Edgar Quinet, I think he was French, and Gottfried Herder, I believe, who wrote on the philosophy of history in the 19th century. I believe they were more famous to French and German academics at the time that Maritain is writing, knew that when they mounted their tripod, and it is even surprising to discover how much an age of prophesying was in the 19th century, which is at first sight the age of positive knowledge, just insofar as it was enlightened by philosophers of history. The philosopher who's content to be not more than human, as Descartes says, hurling an arrow at the accursed theologians, will then deal with the philosophy of history only with a sense of the inadequacy of his resources to the matter under consideration. And if he rises above simple rational empiricism, which is confined to ascertaining proximate causes and is less philosophy than political science, he will not hope to reach certain inferences, except so far as the events which he is judging receive their form from the history of ideas and thus share in its intelligibility. There indeed, in the charting of intellectual streams, absolutely solid mental judgments may become possible by logical necessity and the objective meaning of the concepts. Yet we must beware of a mistake. When we seek to discover in history the evolutionary line of a spiritual force, we must obviously consider this force as a ratio seminalis, causing a development with various forms, conditioned at once by its own internal logic, formal causality, and by the human accidents on which it depends, material causality. What we do, then, is to ascertain the course of spiritual forces passing through men, with all kinds of unforeseen outbursts and fresh starts and great apparent breaks, rather than the direct relations between man and man. Now, I will pause here quickly to note one thing interesting. If you've read Theory and History by Mises, this is basically a Thomistic version of that, of how to chart the history of ideas and its influence in the history of mankind. And it's complemented by atomistic metaphysics. You see how he mentions the formal causality of the internal logic of developments and the material causality, the actual, physical reality of the human being and what is happening to them. Continuing on.
Real quick,
Yes.
breaking news. U.S. Representative Jackie Warsaw, the Republican out of Indiana, has been killed in a car accident. It's shocking. Every time I see a Republican get killed in the news, I'm kind of like, okay, is the left actually cleaning house now? Is the left cleaning out people? That's something to think about now. Just wanted to break the news on the podcast.
What did she know about Hillary Clinton?
That was the very first comment. That was the very first comment on the segment, Andrew.
Every time.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't want to break it too much, but I figured, kind of breaking news, fun to break it live on a podcast, and then kind of think about the left actually take power, you clean house, what you're supposed to do. Seems like they might be, if they're doing it, be interesting.
Indiana is an interesting choice, though.
Yeah,
I'll have to say. All right, continuing.
Was not Rousseau, for instance, for years a Catholic steeped in Catholic teaching? Did not Madame de Warens pass on to him the dubious quality of a quietism, which she in turn had debased? And are there not, besides, obvious oppositions between the optimism of Jean-Jacques and Lutheran pessimism? Yes, that does not destroy the fundamental analogies which, despite the complete difference of manners and condition, make the spirit of Rousseau a revival of the old spirit of Luther. This spiritual filiation is far more worthy of consideration than the historical tie linking Rousseau to Calvinism by his early education. Once the evangelical revolution was complete and spiritual authority had passed to the princes along with the goods of the church, the spirit of Luther had been quickly bridled in Germany by wholly external disciples and mere governmental utility. But deep in Protestant hearts, it was still active. It takes the offensive again with Lessing. It carries all before it with Rousseau. Rousseau really did a work in the sphere of natural morality of the same type as Luther's work in the evangelical sphere. The Germans made no mistake about it, and the Sturm und Drang revived the disorders and delirium which had hailed the advent of the Reformation. But Luther's assault was in the high realms of grace. Rousseau attacked the sensitive and animal element in the human being. It is manifestly absurd to show the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, the Cartesian Reformation, the philosophy of the Enlightenment, the Rousseauism as an unlinear series ending in the apocalypse of the French Revolution. This systematization used by rationalist historians hymning the stages of modern emancipation arbitrarily conceals essential differences and deep oppositions. Yet to refuse to see the final convergence of these same movements would be an equal misconception of reality. We are faced by breaches at different points and powers intersecting and entwined, but tending in fact to the destruction of one same order and one same life. They are then one, at least in negation. It is even possible to find common characteristics and principles in these different spiritual currents, so long as we regard them as analogically, not univocally, common. In them there pass before us, in very different proportions and under forms often opposed, naturalism, individualism, idealism, or subjectivism, all the isms which adorn the modern world. Any comments before we go on to part 2?
Yes. I was going to say that I see at least 2 because we were talking earlier on Twitter about, what are the problems with liberalism? Several of them are named right here. Mm-hmm. And actually there's 4 of them right here. I would add 2 more to the list of materialism and nominalism. Mm-hmm. But I mean, these four are, naturalism, individualism, subjectivism, particularly are, these are absolutely destructive to the human condition. These are, they're destructive to all reason itself, which is funny because, guys like Descartes, were just all big on, we need lots of reason, and he was all about, making the human mind like an angelic mind, and it
Yes.
was like almost pure reason. And yeah, and so you see going through that, actually when you take these principles, you get the logical conclusions that Rousseau came to. Rousseau was the one
Hmm.
who did it, who was the most rational of the
Hmm.
of the bunch, which is really saying something, because I'm sure as you keep going, I'm not sure how if this gets into his history, but
Hmm.
oh boy, this
Oh,
is
it
this guy.
does right now, I believe, if I remember
Oh,
correctly.
let's get going.
Okay. Any comments, Caleb, before we go on?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, Jean-Jacques is no mere theorist of a philosophy of feeling. Like the English moralists of his time, who were rather intellectuals and analysts discoursing on feeling, it has often been noticed that he himself, and how intensely, is all feeling. He lives in every fiber of his being with a kind of heroism, the primacy of feeling. Does that mean that reason plays no part in him? By no means. Reason in such a man plays a twofold part. Sometimes it serves passion, and then it displays a prodigious talent for sophistry. That is the moralizing, stoical, Plutarchian Jean-Jacques, pompous with virtue, censor of the vices of his age, the Rousseau of the Discours, the letter to Lambert, and the Contrat Social. Sometimes reason, like an ineffectual light, watches the intoxications of evil desire and sees clearly the harm of them, but it takes care not to interfere, and watches always, and so really only increases the attraction by giving it a certain flavor of intelligence and artistic perversity, since, as Aristotle says, it is a mark of the artist to remain an artist when he sins deliberately. That is the Jean-Jacques of the weak soul, the indolent Jean-Jacques, the true Jean-Jacques, who resists no allurement, who weakens and wields, who surrenders to pleasure. He sees that he does ill, and keeps his eyes raised to the image of a good, and he delights at the same time in the good he loves but does not, and the evil he does and hates not. That is the Jean-Jacques who, protected by his good mamma of Les Charmettes from the perils of his age, and leaving the education of his purity to that pleasant teacher, at the very time when he is taking lessons from the generous lady, pours out to God his religious effusions and his love of virtue. Attacked by the moral deformities related in the Confessions, the husband of Thérèse in the sight of nature, the glowing confidence of Madame de Houdetot, and her amours with Saint Lambert, in all good faith he sets himself up as teacher of morals, vindicates the family and the home, and eloquently scourges adultery and the vices of the age. He starts the most violent revolutionary fables, and denounces with abhorrence the perils of revolution. He discharges into men's hearts in the Nouvelle Eloise all the infections of voluptuousness, and makes Julie, when it is too late, calmly uphold the maxims of the most sensible and rational ethics. Quote, would you have one always consistent? One essay at least will bear fruit, end quote. He himself said of the Eloise and the stoical Lettres sur les spectacles, which are opposed as white and black, and were written at the same time. Let us
Wow,
not
is he
reproach.
fallen? Wow, is he
Yeah.
fallen? It's
Let
like
us
he
not
came a
reproach.
long way.
Oh
I was
yeah.
a long time before.
Oh, yes. Let us not reproach him. The father of the modern world is an irresponsible. These contradictions are not in the least calculated, but are caused by his mental dissociation. And there is no deceit in them except the sorry cunning of a sick man to gratify his weakness and exploit it. And we ourselves who judge him, secundum hominem dico, are we less full of contrasts, less ready to surrender? Dare we accept his cowardly challenge, which makes a covering for his pride out of a humility required of other people, and say, quote, I am better than that man, end quote? If his public exhibition of himself disgusts us by its shamelessness, the sort of wretched tenderness which he arouses in us, in spite of ourselves, is not due solely to the admirable rhythm of his disclosure and its amazing lyrical flow. The reason is that he bears humanity in us and in himself, and thus awakens a natural sympathy which every being has for its fellow. The question is whether he does not lead us to sympathize with just the lowest parts of our soul and what is most vitiated in the taste of our senses. Any comments before we continue on?
Oh, he's really laying into him like that. I mean, Mariton's way with words is incredible here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's real. It's like the Descartes physiognomy check. It's really, really good.
And if you like that, you should check out his book Degrees of Knowledge. He just like 2 pages talking about the beauty of metaphysics, and it's like it's just pages and pages about like beauty on how logical metaphysics are. It's it's fantastic.
Have to read that. So, if no more comments, I'm going to continue. What is peculiar to Jean-Jacques, his special privilege, is his resignation to himself. He accepts himself and his worst contradictions as the believer accepts the will of God. He acquiesces in being yes and no at the same time, and that he can do, just so far as he acquiesces in falling from the state of reason and letting the disconnected pieces of his soul vegetate as they are. Such is the sincerity of Jean-Jacques and his friends. It consists in never meddling with what you find in yourself at each moment of your life, for fear of perverting your being. So now all moral labor is tainted from its source and by definition with pharisaical hypocrisy, the late state of salvation without works. And it is wicked sophistry to confuse skill in appearing what one is not with zeal to be more vigorously, that is, more spiritually, and to bring the great riot of what is less in us under the law of what is more. We are not unaware that in our perverse hearts, the virtue which is the work of reason alone, proud, stoical virtue, usually has falsehood as its parasite. But we also know that the naive hypocrisy nursed by whosoever sincerity is at least as deep and tenacious as the masked hypocrisy of the Pharisees. And above all, we know that true virtue, the gentle virtue, which is in us primarily the work of grace, as it grows of itself drives all falsehood from the soul. Sincerity is the quality of what is pure and unalloyed. There is a sincerity of matter which would not be perfect in the last analysis, except in isolation from all form, in pure dispersion, in pure potentiality. If it be true that man is man by what is the chief thing in him, that is, by the Spirit, and that his specific sincerity, his sincerity as man, consists in purity of spiritual thought, spiritual sight, by which he knows himself without falsehood. For sincerity, which is not simply purity, but purity of a knowledge uttered to oneself whenever, can only strictly be understood by relation to the Spirit, then we must say that the sincerity of matter, which plunges us in night and gives us over to all the dissociations of dreams, is the very opposite of true sincerity. You must be yourself. In the last years of his life, Jean-Jacques liked to repeat this formula. On his lips it meant, you must be your feeling as God is his being. Does God, who is all act, need forming? You must regard as sin every attempt to form yourself or allow yourself to be formed, to right yourself, to bring your discords to unity again. Every form imposed on the inner world of the human soul, whether it come from nature or grace, is a sacrilegious wrong to nature. The way in which Jean-Jacques is himself is the final resignation of personality. By dint of following the endless inclinations of material individuality, he has completely broken the unity of the spiritual self. The stuff no longer holds together. Man is no longer himself, except at the price of dissolution. The rationalist self had wanted to be self-sufficient. It refused to lose itself in the abyss of God, where it would have found itself. And now it can only seek itself in the abyss of sensitive nature, where it will never more find itself. Love, which was the panting of the spirit, and which presupposes as a condition of self-surrender the self and its immanent life, has gone. Nothing but egoism remains, and there is no ego, but only a stream of phantoms. Whoso's man is Descartes' angel, acting like a beast. who so brought into literature and real life that type of innocent in which the Dostoevsky of Monsieur Guide, I speak only of that Dostoevsky, for the lesson of the other is perhaps less treacherous, found the highest grace. He foreshadows the great dissolution which we are asked to take for the wisdom of the East, and which, alien alike to Hindu metaphysics and the old Chinese ethics, is only the mental collapse of a humanity in surrender. Comments?
Oh yeah, scroll back up.
No problem. Well, where at? Where to?
To where he's talking about you must be yourself. This
Here it
is the original Disney guy.
I
I mean, this is like the Disney. He says that he has a talent for sophistry. This one's still sticking around today. As like that's where this comes from. You have to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like who else would you be?
Man is no longer himself except at the price of dissolution. I love this last two parts, man is no longer himself except at the price of dissolution, and then he says nothing but egoism, and there remains and there is no ego but only a stream of phantoms. You've destroyed yourself because he says it, you refuse to go into the abyss of God where you'd have found yourself. You've gone into the abyss of sensitive nature where you will never more find yourself. There's nothing there for you. Oh, yeah, it's very Augustinian. Augustinian.
And to follow that up, like remember, he started as a fairly religious, pious guy, and eventually he's like, oh, let me just like try all the pleasures, and then he finally gets to, you just have to be yourself. No God, you can't do that. And what ends up happening is he ends up acting kind of like a beast. And I mean, he is the rational conclusion of Descartes, unfortunately.
Oh yes, very much so. Again, such a great phrase. Rousseau's man is Descartes' angel acting like a beast. That's so good. And another tidbit that because we will never stop Luther bashing, is what he says. So now all moral labor is tainted from its source and by definition with pharisaical hypocrisy. The late state of salvation without works, he says with exclamation points. It's just so good. I never made that connection, but yeah, Rahitan has a point there. As an interesting point.
We see Maritain Way is a good job of like roping it all together. Like I'm saying, if you read this in order, like finish the Lucifer part, finish the Descartes part, came to the Rousseau part, his callbacks there. He does a good job of like roping back to what we talked about earlier.
We wouldn't understand the phrase Descartes' angel acting like a beast if we hadn't read that first part of Descartes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Descartes conceives of man as an angel. He has completely mistaken anthropology.
Yeah, he really does build. I really like that. He starts with Lucifer, how Lucifer, same way he's like argues that Lucifer built to Descartes built to Rousseau. He does build his arguments and references back to that, which is a fantastic way of writing his book. I really appreciate that. It's this fantastic guy. Really, his philosophy is fantastic. His writing is just beautiful. I just picked up his apparently he wrote like a biography of Aquinas called The Angelic Doctor, which I just picked up. But I'm super excited to get into that one. But yeah, he's just
if it's anything like this, if it's as good in painting historical pictures as this, it's going to be very good.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad we're covering more Maritain. He is just fantastic, and no one like us and one other guy talking about him really. So we need to.
Yeah, he's very much underappreciated.
Not one audiobook of his books.
That's sad.
I can't even find a PDF of him on Scribd. It's just he's nowhere. It's the same.
You want me to continue, or you got more comments, guys?
I think I was going to comment on something Andrew commented. He beat me to it, so I'm good.
Okay, so part 4. If Rousseau's declamations bore us horribly, the interest of his life is always fresh. What is the most striking characteristic of his life, rich as it was in psychological lessons? To my mind, is what one might call the mimicry of sanctity. I do not say it was a studied comedy. I say spontaneous mimicry, naive, springing from the heart, sincere duplicity whose first dupe was Jean-Jacques. Let us consider our hero from this point of view with due attention. concentrating in himself the heritage of all the loss of balance brought into the world since the Reformation, sick and ruined by neurosis, profoundly asthenic, a battlefield of exhausting hereditary contrasts, he unites with wonderful artistic gifts, with a quick intelligence capable of remarkable instinctive good sense, with overstrung sensitiveness, with high desires, and a flame for genius which shows in his wonderful eyes an extraordinary impotence in the function by which man has rational mastery over reality. In the speculative order, every effort after logical and coherent construction is a torture to him. Quote, his various reasonings never harmonize except in the cadence of his lamentation, end quote. And particularly in the practical order, will as a rational faculty does not exist in him. To realize a dictate of reason, to bring to being, to its own active being, a determination judged to be good, is impossible for him. He almost wholly lacks that act of practical reason which Thomist psychology calls the imperium, by which the intelligence, moved by the will, orders the executive faculties by a positive fiat to bring into the formidable world of existence what it has judged should be done. As to the moral judgment itself, it is often good, even excellent in him, at least the speculative judgment which he forms when he consults his love of virtue. And what man does not love virtue, does not find it beautiful and good? That is an effect of the essential propensities of human nature, and that is why we are also naturally led to require virtue in others. Now Jean-Jacques, who is not bothered by the world's maxims and the prejudices of false reason, the good Jean-Jacques of nature, proclaims a theoretical love of virtue with more candor than anyone, nay, with a sort of cynicism. But if it comes to forming a practical judgment, to making a resolution by reference to his own objects, to choosing for himself when confronted with reality what has to be done here and now, then reason capsizes, and the attraction of the moment is so strong in him, so exclusive, that it makes him at once consider any attempt to reconcile the act to be performed on earth with the speculative heaven and its higher rules to be absolutely impossible, and thus dispenses him from even the shadow of effort or struggle. It comes to this, that in Jean-Jacques there is no rectification of the will. Hence his vile actions and his moral weakness. That cowardice in face of reality is essentially the explanation of his abandonment of his 5 children and his crises of passion, his breaking of friendship, his impotent frenzies, the dubious narcissism of his opinions, and all the shames and wretchedness of his life.
Okay,
and
we
then,
gotta stop there. You're going way too far. You're covering way too much.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, I would scroll back up for all of this because there's so much right in there. It's like,
oh yes,
and like this is a major part of his Rousseau's temperament is that he never sees himself as doing any wrong, and it's like he always finds a way to rationalize what he's doing, and he's all and like I remember at one story, like I forget who it was who was supporting him in like England. At one point, he had to
David Hume, the philosopher.
Yeah, Hume. Yep. And he just like screws this guy over repeatedly, and all of Hume's friends are like, "Dude, come on, he's such a fraud.
Yeah,
he's
Adam
completely
Smith
conning you."
Even Adam Smith was saying this.
Yeah, and so and like I mean, this guy, he was like just horrible to everyone he ever met. And like, I mean, when he abandoned his 5 children, which, you know, by the way, really says something to me right now. Like, how could you abandon your children, 5 of them?
And then he writes Emile, which is on children and their upbringing, which is after his 3rd abandonment. It was after his 3rd abandonment.
Okay, so I know nothing about Rousseau. He's despicable. So I don't want to look into him. I never did. But what? Basically, 5 kids and wrote a book on raising children. What the fuck?
And his conclusion was the state could do it better.
Yeah, it's a treatise on education. Emile or a treatise on education.
That was his conclusion. I was like, oh my god.
This is the guy who social contractors who built most of like Western political science.
Oh yeah.
I hate us so much.
His madness is what we instantiated into law.
None of this would happen if the church killed Rousseau.
I know.
You should have just. Why did no one murder him?
I know. You're telling me there wasn't one evil cardinal? Come on.
Come
What
on,
is
we
this?
had-
What are we, Protestants?
Come on, we said murder. I have this joke. I've been saying this for a while now. My Protestant friends hate it. Christianity was better when the church killed the heretics. It was. It was better. We should kill more heretics again.
But yeah, it's like with it, with his like kind of art, and I really like how he puts it down to that artistic temperament, because it's a very, very superficial temperament that goes into being an artist. That's what makes them good. Is that they're good at seeing the superficial, and in ways that other people just aren't. And because of that, I mean, you get to not look anything more than an inch deep. And you can always find a way to justify yourself like this, to where you can be just an awful person, and you can, but you always walk around like, oh yeah, I'm a really good, normal, average human being. Why is life so hard for me? Oh, what was me? And I'm the victim. And that's exactly what you have in Rousseau, who, by the way, himself was abandoned as a kid. By his father, and so I was like, ooh, that's where that comes from, and is that his love of virtue, and what he says, where he's masking his pride with humility and all that, and he's compensating his psychology. Yes, he is compensating for the lack of having a father, and that's why he rejects authority so much. And you see, I mean, you see so much orphan psychology in him all over the place.
I didn't know this was saying Thomist psychology. I just looked it up, and I've already got like a bunch of books added to my shopping cart.
I think Father Ripperger has like a free volume treatise on Thomist psychology.
I saw a post on Twitter a while ago. It was like there's some new book coming out. It was like called Thomist Psychology: Refutation to Modern Psychological Problems. Okay. I saw like it's been shared around after the whole news broke out the serotonin not being the cause of like depression and that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely looking into that now. Like psychology isn't materialistic.
I have to make one point about Thomist psychology. In the new Pope, that show. There's one line in there. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was the young Pope who made this point that, and I'm like, that's such a good point. Where the one of the cardinals says, and how in the world did we let psychology slip past us? Billions of dollars sunk into this thing every year, no real work. How did we let this slip? How did the Catholic Church let this slip by us? It's like,
yes, very
like,
much
all things. I was like, "Ooh, that's a really good point." How did that happen?
Yeah, that's something I want to. I'll find a good book and want to do a live reading one of those eventually. I'll add Thomistic psychology to the list of things we're going to cover.
But yeah, basically with Rousseau, his moral judgment is really, really good, except when it comes to him.
Yeah, there's no practical judgment. The speculative order is usually fine. Like he'll decry adultery and he'll talk about the evils of voluptuousness, as Mahitan said. But like when it comes to any affair of the practical order, when it comes to concrete objects and reference and reality, he's completely disconnected. It's this it's just very, very much reminded me of Mahitan's portrait of Luther. It's this, complete disconnection between what should be done and what I can do, and this despair at it and completely giving up. Absolutely no effort expanded in that direction of rectifying yourself. As he says, there is no rectification of the will in Rousseau. There is no correcting of it.
There is no correcting him at all. It's like, because the idea that he's in the wrong at all is just anathema to him.
Yes.
It's like, you must be the bad person for even suggesting it.
All right, then. Do we continue?
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Okay. And then we are at the antipodes of the moral life and holiness, antipodes being diametric opposites. Agreed. But we see what happens. Incapable of imposing himself on reality by that supreme act of rational command without which there is no moral virtue, this perfect romantic stops at and rests in the sphere of art, of the virtue of art, which is complete as soon as it makes a good judgment about what should be done. He judges then, and he judges well, when there is no question of himself coming to resolve hic et nunc, here and now. He judges and does not act. And there, freed from all anxiety about performance, he merely dreams his life, builds it in the world of images and artistic judgments, and as he is a voluptuously sublime artist and has the love of virtue and delights in the image of the good, the life he thus builds is an astonishing one of sweetness and kindness, of candor, simplicity, and easy sanctity without nails or cross. Is it then surprising that he is eternally maudlin about himself, and that Saint-Preux and Julie, that is, Jean-Jacques all the time, shed tears of pious and sincere enthusiasm over virtue just when they are surrendering to the least virtuous propensities? It is rather a double personality than hypocrisy, but it is much more pernicious and more unhealthy.
All right, we gotta go back. Yeah, we gotta go back. We gotta go back.
Just in that paragraph? Okay, let's go.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot there because keep going back. Yeah, scroll back to where he's talking about unable to impose himself on reality, and basically the antipodes of moral life and holiness. Agreed, but we must see what happens. Incapable of imposing himself on reality by that supreme act of rational command. Right there is subjectivism. That is the essence of subjectivism right there, because subjectivism reverses object and subject. So normally, in a Thomistic sense, the objective is what's around you. That's that's the external world. The internal world is what's subjective. You can make the internal world whatever you want it to be, and the external world is what it is. Whereas with subjectivism, that what happens is you get the reverse. This is where Kantianism comes in, where basically what's when you have subjectivism and you doubt the senses is what comes from Descartes. Because Descartes, remember his cogito. This is where you come from, where the only thing I can know really is inside of myself. That's the objective. So therefore, everything around me is just subjective. And what does that lead? So everything inside of me, my thoughts, my feelings, is the objective world of things I know. Everything out there, I can make it whatever the hell I want. And this is why all liberalism leads to totalitarianism, because that right there, that logical conclusion that the rest of the world is around me is subjective and I can make it whatever I want, and my internal world is what it is and is inalterable. And that is where the point that I have the book right here. That I was reading.
I knew it was coming.
They Have Uncrowned Him by Marcel Lefebvre. He makes this point explicitly that when you reverse the objective and the subjective, you get totalitarianism, necessarily so, because right there he would impose himself on the rest of reality by reason. Like the command of reason. That's his justification. That's where
he'll never. And it's important to note that he'll never do anything to resolve the questions here and now. He judges, but only judges. There is no question of himself coming to a resolve. Hic et nunc, here and now in Latin. No question of it. There's absolutely no chance. No. To joke, it's sort of like there's no potentiality for him to even. There's no potential for him to even do this.
Oh yeah. But when you make an entire ideology and you legislate it into law that's based on the idea of subjectivism, liberalism necessarily will always lead to totalitarianism because of that subjectivist presupposition that's within it. And again, this is diametrically opposed to the Catholic idea of truth, which is everything around me is the objective. Everything around me is the object outside of me. That is, that is what's objectively knowable, and what's inside of me is subjectively knowable. And by reversing subject and object, you get that, this totalitarian mindset right there. And I guarantee you, if he had power, he would have done something with it. He would be exactly the sort of tyrant that he was always, kind of railing against.
Oh yes. And it's interesting to note that this is a kind of sickness of spirit, as Maritain believes in Rousseau, that it is not hypocrisy, it is double personality, which is much more pernicious and more unhealthy. It's, a crisis of spirit, which no one in his life, I don't know if no one, maybe if he had good at bringing a good authority in the church.
No, he did not.
Good priest.
Not really, no.
No, yeah, but if he had those things, maybe he could have at least been, if he was forced to be a Carthusian monk, which take a vow of silence except to sing hymns, maybe he could have been fit. By the way, great documentary about them is Into Great Silence, which Yarvin has recommended. It's really, really good. It's completely silent. There's only text, and it's just like a time in a Carthusian monastery. Very, very interesting.
Yarvin has some great when it comes to like Catholic stuff. Yarvin always seems to have like great takes on it, like his joke about what was it? His confessing is like therapy, but it works.
Yeah,
great one.
Yeah.
His if you don't believe spirits of power can come from nice clothes, you're a Protestant. I mean, his review of the young Pope is amazing.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's really, really funny too. He went onto that channel because it's like a channel with like 200 subscribers or something.
Well, that's why I'm hoping to get him on. I emailed him trying to get him on. I tried to get him on for just a he went an AA stream for a call-out episode. I want to get him on for a Eric von Kruten episode because he's referencing a whole bunch. I'm like, it was a focused Ludin episode. Talk about why he's awesome. But I've not got a response yet.
Mm-hmm.
Probably won't.
And but that point that he's making that is made right there about it's basically a double personality. I mean, that's kind of what C.S. Lewis talks about when he says that it's the like bad men. No, they're not very good. Really bad men think they're doing great. And that's what that is right there. He's the really bad sort who thinks he's doing fantastic. It's that double personality of love and virtue that is disconnected from reality. That's what does it. That's how you get the Hitlers. That's how you get the Stalins. That's how you get the Maos. That's how you get the mass murderers who are like, I'm the greatest. Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. And anyone who doesn't like me is just a hater. That's how you get that. It's that little disconnect right there to where, oh yeah, they love virtue, and just not when they have to do it.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah, I mean, I might have to keep using that. The hiket nunc, no here and now. There's just the the judgment of the mind, which is suspended in eternity, sees itself as God, and no action in the world. It's already perfect in its being. It just needs to act out whatever it is. There's no reforming of the will. There's no rectification, no correction, no living according to God. There's only living according to whatever the self is. But there is no self if you don't if you don't find it in God. Our hearts are restless, so they rest in Thee.
Mm-hmm.
So, part 5, unless you guys have more comments.
Keep going.
Oh yeah, I got nothing else to add. Let's keep doing it. Where were we on 5?
5. You there? Okay. Well then, it only needs a favorable occasion, or an advance of the neurosis, for this imaginary world in which Rousseau spends most of his life to slip into existence in its turn. But, if I may say so, by guile, by way not of the moral will, but on the contrary, of a more complete abandonment to the automatism of images, a final psychological cleavage. Then, following the lines of least inward resistance and the inclinations of the artistic will, Jean-Jacques will now let his dreams arrange his own life like a play, that life which he has given up all idea of shaping by the difficult effort of the moral will. First, by strokes here and there, then at last, systematically and continuously, he makes of his very being a deception, a simulation of perfection, a semblance of sanctity. Quote, nature has made of him nothing but a good worker, sensitive, it is true, even to ecstasy, end quote, he says of himself. We must understand that the mental dominance of art, invading with the help of madness the whole field of the spirit, will at last take the place of all human development in him. See him at the moment when, after his first discourse, he sets up as a recluse and a copyist of music at 10 sous a page. He made his timidity and his deep natural unsociability the very means of that radiation amongst men for which he had hitherto longed in vain, and he has found a sort of interior balance. He reforms, that is, he begins to dream no longer in imagination alone, but in action, to set his images free not only in his books, but in his life. Quote, from then on I became virtuous, or at least enraptured with virtue, end quote, or at least several quotes here. Everything helped to detach my affections from this world. I left the world and its pomps. A great revolution had just taken place in me. A different moral world was revealed to my eyes. I can date my complete renunciation of the world from that time, end quote. Very interesting that he just admits this. I didn't know. Complete renunciation from the world. But not in the ascetic church Catholic sense, which is against the Arians and the Gnostics and the evil and seeing the world as evil, but from a very, very different sense. A reformation, certainly, but an artistic, not moral reformation. The heart is still tainted and putrescent, thoroughly rotten with sensual self-love and self-complacency. He decides to set all powers of his soul to smash the fetters of opinion and do bravely everything that seemed good to him without troubling himself at all about men's judgments. But he declares immediately that this is perhaps the greatest resolution, or at least the most useful to virtue that ever mortal conceived, showing thus, as by the skillful publicity given to his undertaking, that he reforms for the public and not for himself. He affects a plebeian manner and plays the Christian cynic, but he is more than ever occupied with the effect which he produces on the world of nobility and wealth, which visits him constantly in his room, and will soon applaud the devant du village. At last he is a model for humanity, a professor of virtue, a reformer of morals. And it is just at this very time that the future author of Emile abandons his third child.
See him
See him after that in his last years, after the exile, after his great bitterness and tribulations. He has fled from Hume in England, as we mentioned before, suffering from a real fit of madness, as he himself confessed to Condorcet. For 3 years he has wandered from town to town, chased by the demons of honors and persecutions. He is back in Paris. He is about to write the dialogues and the reveries. He feels himself wrapped in a work of darkness, whose frightful gloom he cannot in any way pierce, and to which all the present generation conspires. He is surrounded by triple walls of darkness, shut up in the immense building of shadow which they have raised around him. He knows that the whole world is in league against his person, that the conspiracy of philosophers has sworn his ruin, that he is forced to live shut away from the society of men. Quote, the league is universal, without exception forever, and I know I shall end my days in this ghastly prescription without ever fathoming the mystery of it. End quote. Well, he pardons. He no longer answers his detractors. He behaves generously towards David Hume. He does nothing beyond weeping over his misfortunes, over the good works he has not been allowed to do, over his unparalleled goodness of heart. Bernardin de Saint-Pierre is amazed at the simplicity and peace of his modest dwelling in the Rue des Platières. Unselfish, temperate, gentle, indulgent, resigned, poor and loving poetry, he lives secluded. He has renounced the company of the great, as well as the Armenian costume. If you guys didn't know, he used to wear a costume. In fact, one of the most famous paintings, he himself is wearing a hat. I believe this is what Mahitan is referencing. He botanizes. He has entirely left the world. Doubtless he has not abandoned himself, and yet there truly is over him, at this moment, the shadow of greatness and true goodness. What has actually happened? Actually, he has finally slipped into dream, under the pressure of sorrow and tortures only too real, and a certain calming desire brought by age, mental sickness has finished its work. Whoso has broken not every moral bond with the world, but every psychological bond with reality. Henceforward he can become indifferent, at least so he believes, to outer things, which are now nothing to him. No longer under restraint to reality, decompressed, if I may use the word, his imaginary self, his self of goodness, the self of his imagination and feeling, the self of his artist dream unfolds in free relaxation. If my husband is not a saint, who is? Dehez will cry after his death. Jean-Jacques enters sanctity under full sail, his own sanctity, just when he is going mad. when he is entering the harbor of dementia. He is indeed the saint of the age. Do not all the pilgrimages to his grave bear witness to it? The queen herself makes that pilgrimage. The sensitive souls come first, then the good republicans will come in their turn to the poplared isle of Ermenonville to shed tears on the holy martyr's grave, the grave of the man of nature and truth, of the man who never walked but in the paths of virtue, and venerate his relics, his snuff box, his shoes, his cap. The cap is the sign of liberty, cried Cherhan to Montmorency in 1791, showing the crowd Jean-Jacques' cap, and this one covered the head of the most illustrious of its defenders. It is in this sick genius, this empty sham, that the 18th century possesses its authentic model of virtue, while true sanctity begs on the roads in the person of another vagabond, a real poor man, this time Saint Benedict Labre. Is there a more striking case of pathological counterfeit, a living and palpable phantom of goodness and wisdom, and incited and understanding adrift, a will in ruins and incapable of the smallest rational recovery, and artistic gifts more beautiful than ever, pure surrender to the flow of dream waters, a soul fully, totally, supremely swept by self-love.
He's such a good writer.
He is really good. Anyway, comments, guys.
Okay, hold on. I'm getting some chats in here. One from Definitely 12. This sounds like it was written by King James. From Caleb. Wait, y'all venerating snuff boxes? And this guy's voice to do audiobooks.
I am considering doing some pre-recorded readings of a few dialogues, but one dialogue specifically by Jonathan Bowden, and maybe a few other things.
It's, it's Maritain is such a great writer. Actually, it's my only complaint really have when I read him is that if I'm trying to read something in a hurry, I have like 20 minutes before I get to work, I'll read some Maritain. I'll get to like a page and have, okay, it's beautiful, but what are you saying?
Yeah, no, he's the worst.
To what he's trying to say.
He's the worst professor of Thomism. He's the opposite of Edward Fazer. He's really beautiful and really, really good if you know Thomism and Scholasticism. If you don't expect to learn it from him. You should have basic knowledge of it. And by that, I mean, you should have read Introduction to Scholastic Metaphysics by Edward Fazer.
My friend's first book on Thomism he bought Jacques Maritain's Introduction to Philosophy.
Maybe that's good. Maybe Maritain knows that's an introduction.
I looked it up. That book is like, people consider like the worst introduction to philosophy because it doesn't like really, he doesn't introduce you to anything. He kind of just starts at high level stuff and hopes you get it.
Oh,
and so
that's
it's
interesting method.
He also bought Approaches to God instead of buying like Ed Fazer's 5 Proofs of God. He's like, what is this by Jacques Maritain? You say he's good. I'm like, yeah, he's good, but
Approaches. I've read Approaches to God. It's good. Your friend is fucked.
It's a good book, but it's not a good introduction.
I mean, I remember reading I read it before. I read it first before I got Fazer, then I read it again after I read 5 Proofs and Introduction to Scholastic Metaphysics. It made some sense and it was very beautiful and worth reading, at least if you're already a Catholic. It's not worth reading if you want to get quick book on Aquinas's 5 Ways and a few others. It's not worth it for that. If you're not acquainted with scholasticism. If you are, it's really, really good. And it's the middle part is a brief recapitulation of the 5 ways. First part is an introduction to approaches of God and the sort of one of his own approaches. And the last part is another one of his own approaches.
Here's how good he is. He has a graph that proves God is real. See?
This graph, this torturous graph that before I read 5 Proofs made absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah,
I posted it before. I might post it again because it's really funny.
I was flipping through the book trying to read it. I get to this page. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm gonna go back to Fazer for a bit.
But okay, so to comment on the passage, what I find most, or at least interesting, that really pulls my eye, is the part where he shows that he becomes a saint, which is historically very true. While a real saint, Saint Benedict Labre, Labre, is that how you pronounce it? Let me see his name. Saint Benedict. Is not cared at all for the century. No one looks at him. Benedict Joseph Labre was a French mendicant, Franciscan tertiary, and Catholic saint. Yeah. Okay. So the exact counterexample to everything that Jean-Jacques is essentially the antipode. Would that be the word in English? That Mariton uses is a mendicant on the street with no celebrity. Do you have any more comments? Because that's just what pulled my eye. But I'm reading, so I'm not. I absorb it at the moment, but then I'm forced to focus on the next thing.
Yeah. I would say the what you said about basically him becoming a saint. It kind of points to that point Zammy's been making that the Protestants, they were consistent. Luther would be like their saint and be their prophet. And I guess these people, politically speaking, actually did do that. They turned someone who should be like, they're at least consistent in that. This guy did do so much that they should treat him as a saint, and they do, which is, I guess, they're consistent, and I would say it's sacrilege and blasphemous, obviously, but it's, we here at Austro Thomism love consistency. It's why we love Ace so much.
Well, it's something I'm kind of realizing right now is how much of Protestantism is from Rousseau. Forget just liberalism. I'm looking at how much of this description really, really fits Protestants. Look at the this idea that you can be very disconnected from. You can be very disconnected from. Here's everything that happened before before Martin Luther, and then after Martin Luther. And you think, oh yeah, you just make it up as you go along. And if anyone wants to be a Bible scholar, that's fine. Yeah, the Catholic Church it got corrupted. That was fine. Yeah, but no, that's that. Where'd you get that authority? But this idea that you can just be just disconnected from your history, disconnected from reality, and kind of see yourself as a good person, that comes back to Rousseau, not Luther. You know what I mean?
And there's one phrase here which perfectly captures Rousseau, and it just perfectly captures Rousseau the man. So I'll just read it again. At last, he is a model for humanity, a professor of virtue, a reformer of morals. And it is just at this very time that the future author of Emile abandons his third child. I mean, individualism. Man.
It's and you see that same sort of individualism in Protestantism. You see who is it that really praises that rugged individualism, which is a quote from Rousseau, by the way. It's always Rush Limbaugh. I remember growing up on Rush Limbaugh, and he was he was a Methodist. He was, again, one of the greatest American broadcasters that we've ever had.
Just the best.
Yeah, I mean, he was by far the best. I mean, I don't think anyone's beaten him to this day. No. And who really likes that rugged individual? It's always him. That was always the thing he would say. And I mean, it's hitting me now, just because I was raised by Protestants as well, that they always praise that sort of rugged individualism too. And this is where that comes from. I mean, obviously none of them would, be okay with abandoning your kids, but I mean, none of them would go that far, but they, the origins of it is right there, and they're just being logically inconsistent about it. But I mean, they're subjectivists. That's also that also kind of begins with Rousseau, where you can just be completely disconnected from reality.
We're going for an hour. Do you guys want to keep going, or do you want to stop here?
I can keep going. It depends on you.
I would say, yeah, keep going. Make it. Let's go for an hour 15 or something like that.
Okay. Part 6. He is holy. His holiness consists in loving himself without comparison, by one of those feats of psychological acrobatics of which only disease is capable. Never having conceived his moral life as anything but a performance, he ceases to think of the opinion of others on the day when there is only himself to fill the auditorium. He ceases to order everything to himself on the day when his self has swallowed everything up. And thus egocentrism at its culminating point becomes capable of aping the unselfishness of charity. The self of Jean-Jacques has become in itself so interesting, so highly consoling, that it deserves to be contemplated and loved for itself alone, in all its parts and all its works, noble or base, simply because it is. He's made himself God. So immense that no obstacle can bruise it in future, so divine that it has no longer any contrary, so that Jean-Jacques loves himself too absolutely to have any self-esteem left. That is, to envy or ask of others. Quote, no more susceptible of modesty than of vanity, he is content to feel what he is. I love myself too much to be able to hate anybody. That would contract, compress my existence, and I want rather to extend it over the whole universe. End quote. Watch him manufacturing his halo. I doubt, he writes, whether mortal ever said better and more sincerely to God, thy will be done. He is convinced that he is unique of his kind, like pure spirits, Descartes' angels here, that he is the good man par excellence, the best of man. Not that he is virtuous. He has renounced that name since he yielded completely to his dream self and by that became holy. But because he is good, again, much like God, pure good, because he embodies in himself the goodness of nature, a distinction which will escape the pilgrims of Hermenonville and the devotees of the holy martyr. He's basically saying people who like Rousseau don't understand metaphysics. Let us read again the extraordinary prologue to the Confessions. Quote, I am proposing an undertaking the like of which has never been, and of its performance there will be no imitators. End quote. So much for modesty. Begin quote, I want to show my fellows a man in all truth of nature, end quote. So much for nature. And that man will be myself. Quote, myself alone. I feel my heart, and I know men. I am made like none of those whom I have seen. I dare to think that I am made like none that are. If I am not of more account, at least I am different. Whether nature did well or ill to break the mold in which she cast me can only be judged when I have been read. End quote. So much for the angelus conception of the individual. And now for sanctity. Quote, let the trumpet of the last judgment sound when it will. I shall come to appear before the sovereign judge with this book in my hand, the Confessions. I shall say boldly, this is what I have done, what I thought, what I was. I have told with equal candor, and good and ill, have shown myself just as I was, contemptible and vile, when I was so, good and generous and sublime, when I was so. I have revealed my heart as it was in your eyes, eternal being. Gather round me the countless multitude of my fellow creatures. Let them hear my confessions. Let them lament my infamies. Let them blush for my meanness. Let each of them in his turn disclose his heart at the foot of your throne of the same sincerity. And then let but one of them say, if he dare, I was better than that man.
Holy shit.
Yeah. What a piece of work.
The ego. I mean, and we haven't got to part of Lucifer's sex, and we talked about Lucifer's egoism and how it's all, all Lucifer's built
This
out of
man
ego.
trumped him.
Yeah, easily
man,
and Trump loses ego is quite a feat, and Rousseau just fucking does it.
Dude.
Wow.
He's like doing a high jump over this thing.
That's insane. I have never read something so centered and so.
Yeah, go back and read that again. Go back and read that.
The whole thing?
Yeah, it's like let the trumpet at the last judgment.
Sound. Okay, let the trumpet of the last judgment sound when it will. I shall come to appear before the sovereign judge with this book in my hand.
He's not talking about the Bible, by the way.
No, that's talking about the confession. No, it's talking about
his own book that he wrote.
Yeah, it's talking about the book he wrote. It's talking about the very book he's writing this in.
Oh my God.
I shall say boldly, this is what I have done, what I thought, what I was. I have done with equal candor, good and ill, have shown myself just as I was, contemptible and vile when I was so, good and generous and sublime when I was so. I have revealed my heart as it was in your eyes, eternal being. Gather round me the countless multitude of my fellow creatures. Let them hear my confessions. Let them lament my infamies. Let them blush for my meanness. Let each of them in his turn disclose his heart at the foot of your throne with the same sincerity. and then let but one of them say, if he dare, I was better than that man.
Like,
I was better.
like I saw
It's like-
Lusso.
Really,
That was easy.
not hard.
I saw Lusso was being an arrogant piece of shit when he said,
Yeah.
how could I not say after I've done confessing and been received reconciliation that I am not better than a man who has not gone to it yet? I said that was a piece of shit move.
I mean, by the
This
way,
takes the cake.
yeah, I mean, this is where you get the you know, that phrase that, you know, hypocrisy is a feature of the left, not a flaw.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's not a bug. It's like, this is
Wow.
where it comes from. It's like
So-
that hypocrisy right there. It's like,
Oh,
and like
continue?
the-
No, no.
Oh my
I'm just in
Lord.
complete shock.
The next
right
part
now.
is really
Like,
good. Trust me.
insane.
Okay.
Okay.
How can you top this,
You'll see.
Russo?
So
Yeah, okay.
Mahiton's commentary. We may wonder at the way he confesses and realize what the Christian idea of confession has become in his hands. He accuses himself, but only to give himself absolution, the crown and the palm. If I may use the phrase, he has turned Christian humility inside out like a glove. He finds himself quite at home with the eternal being. The fact is that this eternal being is already hardly more than a name for conscience, hardly more than the immanent God of the Romantic philosophy. There are other passages. Quote, I should go distrust fully, he wrote in 1763, alluding to a plan of suicide, if I knew a better man than myself. And again, after speaking of his failings, with all that, I am convinced that of all the men I have known in my life, none was better than I. What is to be said? He is right to proclaim himself good, and we must believe him. He is in truth the man of natural goodness. Is he not always innocent? Who, whatever he may have done, since he has never willed any evil any more than he willed good? No one has realized to the same degree and so purely the kind of goodness of which human nature is capable when it overflows in pure spontaneous emotion, in a miraculous isolation from the order of reason and the order of grace. He shows us just what this goodness can and cannot do. From this point of view, he is a unique and valuable specimen. Only we will add, with the gardener's wife at Montmorency, what a pity that so good a man wrote Gospels. That so good a man wrote Gospels. At last, he attributes to himself the privilege of being the still unblemished man of nature, without trace or stain of the original corruption due to civilization. This is what Monsieur Cellier calls his immaculate conception. And he becomes as God himself. All is over for me on earth. No one can now do me good or harm there. And there am I, calm at the bottom of the abyss, a pure, luckless mortal, but impassible even as God. Poor.
I don't even think Ayn Rand was this spiteful. I'm gonna.
Nope.
No,
Nope, not even close.
No, even Ayn Rand wasn't
Even
this way.
Ayn Rand would read this and be like, okay, maybe selflessness isn't a virtue. Maybe
Because
pride isn't a virtue.
Ayn Rand at least had hero worship. Like, she actually thought there were these great men who were better than her. She at least had
Yeah.
that conception. She had the conception of worship into a greater good in some sense. That's why she wrote the novels she did with these, remarkable, ridiculous
Yeah.
heroes.
How would work? That's it.
Rousseau is his own remarkable, ridiculous hero.
I
Holy shit.
need to read Thomistic psychology and then just write on yourself. Like, that would
You
be
want me to continue, or you guys want to comment? 'Cause I'm almost at the end.
I was like, are we even able to, like, I almost feel like that's a stopping point. Like, how could it get better than that?
Okay, let me just finish this part. Let's get to 7, and then we can stop at 7.
Okay.
Poor Jean-Jacques, detached from everything, truly, except from his exorbitant individuality. We cannot help but pity him greatly, as we do Nietzsche, both of them victims, because they lived them to the very end of principles of madness which they took from their age, and they returned them to their age with interest. But we must distrust this compassion. It must not mask from us the monstrous aberration of this self or sordid quality set up as just judge of the universe, nor the catastrophes for which responsibility lies on that indignant and querulous sensitiveness erected as a kind of law and the last court of appeal against the order of the world. Each one of us perceives dimly that the whole order of the physical world is of less account than one's spirit, and that is why the wretched man is able to take us in. The human heart yields. It thinks it hears the lamentations of a spirit, nay, some echo of the unutterable lamentation, which is the cry of the spirit of holiness in us, at which the joints of creation groan. It hears only a vicious riot of flesh and blood.
Wow.
Wow.
I just like I can't get I knew he had a real ego streak. I knew he was bad shit. This is like next level shit. Oh my god.
This is
I mean, this is like,
impressive.
oh my god. Yeah, Rousseau, you're beautiful just the way you are. No need to change. There's no possible improvement. Oh my lord.
Wow. It is like, it's honestly like, when most people have a crazy ideology, you have to do a reductio ad absurdum, make it so how crazy it is.
Yeah.
Rousseau's own writing is the extreme of it. Like, there's no need to like do a reductio ad absurdum. You can just quote Rousseau, like, this is how extreme it is. There's no need to like do any argument. Just read it. Anyone who says, yeah, that makes sense, is an idiot.
He like born in in like 2020? I'm like, Jesus
Like
Christ.
He sounds like
this
a
guy is
TikToker.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he is Clown World on steroids. I mean, he's Clown World in like what is
King of the
this?
Clown
Like
Wood, Rousseau.
18th century? He's 18th century, I
I
believe.
think it was like
Yeah,
17th,
he's 18th century.
18th century. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's like full blown Clown World.
We need someone
And
to Photoshop Rousseau with a clown mascot and say King of the Clown Wood.
With the Zoomer haircut, Zoomer perm.
Yes.
No, and like marching with Black Lives Matter.
Uh-huh.
I was George Floyd.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
No, better. George Floyd was me.
Oh my god. He would say that. Oh my god. I'm speechless.
George Floyd was only striving for Rousseau's greatness.
Rousseau wished he could have a counterfeit 20.
Is there anyone today who actually is like a Rousseauian guy? Like, I know we see it like his influence and stuff. Is there anyone like in academia who still is like a Rousseau person? Like, do these people exist?
I can't
or-
imagine.
I've met like art girls who also kind of do philosophy who like Rousseau and know nothing about his life.
that makes sense.
Who read read the social contract and had to write a paper on it.
Mhm.
I know
Yeah,
that type.
art
That
girls
isn't a
shouldn't be allowed-
philosopher.
Art girls shouldn't be allowed to do philosophy.
I've had this comment from even my liberal friends. Trust me.
Yeah, they said that's it. No, go back to
You just said-
painting. Your paintings. I don't want to.
You
talk about
could have just stopped it at art people shouldn't be allowed to do.
And the prose of Rousseau is beautiful, by the way. Like, I have revealed my heart as it was in your eyes, eternal being. Gather round me the countless multitude of my fellow creatures. Let them hear my confessions. Let them lament my infamies. Let them blush for my meanness. That's beautiful. But then you go,
He said
let
that English
each,
teacher.
and then you continue. Let each of them in his turn disclose his heart at the foot of your throne with the same sincerity. Good. And then let but one of them say, if he dare, I was better than that man.
Rousseau is another example of a liberal philosopher who should have just been an English teacher.
And I also like
this
Maritain. Maritain's prose is actually just as good as Rousseau's, I think.
Yeah.
Where
French
the last
speaking, man.
paragraph, each of one perceives dimly that the whole order of a physical world. I'll just cut the sentence. The human heart yields. It thinks it hears the lamentations of a spirit. Nay, some echo of the unutterable lamentation, which is a cry of the spirit of holiness in us, at which the joints of creation groan. But really, in fact, it hears only a vicious riot of flesh and blood. That's a really good part, chapter.
Yeah.
In there.
I mean, that's the French Revolution right there.
Yes, exactly.
Oh
It's-
my god.
Maritain
And
is
you can-
really, really good. So
And
good.
you can see like exactly where the French Revolution comes from when like this is the father of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Holy
Oh, yeah.
crap. I mean, is it,
As you thought before, he became the saint of the revolution, as Maritain pointed
yeah.
out.
That is,
oh my god.
yeah. The French Revolution. I was thinking the other day, like French Revolution was so bad that even like in the Assassin's Creed game, which are already rated, M and that kind of stuff, they can do whatever they want. in the French Revolution, one of Assassin's Creed Unity, they barely touch any of the politics, and they barely touch any of it because it's like, no, it's just a backdrop. The French Revolution is a backdrop to the story. There's no
Yeah,
interaction.
because if
can't
you
do
go
any
too
of it.
deep into it, it's really, really bad, gentlemen.
Yeah,
It's
You
bad.
can't do it. Like
As
Assassin's Creed
Ladin
3,
described, it's so bad.
exactly.
It's so bad.
Assassin's Creed 3, all of it was like focused. You have many revolutionary characters. It was like, that was the story with the American Revolution. This is no backdrop. They can't touch it. Like, there's like one side where there's like one guy, and it's like, that's as far as they go into the French Revolution because it's just that terrible.
Yeah,
It's wow.
you just can't with it.
Oh my god.
Oh my god! I'm just
Right.
like, I knew he was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I just like, I didn't even know how. This is just so much more than I expected.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Yeah, his holiness consists in loving himself without comparison by one of those feats of psychological acrobatics of which only disease is capable. Never having conceived his mortal life as anything but a performance, he ceases to think of the opinion of others on the day when there is only himself to fill the auditorium. The self of Jean-Jacques has become in itself so interesting, so highly consoling that it deserves to be contemplated and loved for itself alone. This is Aristotle's unmoved mover. Because Aristotle had no conception of a Christian or Catholic God, he thought the unmoved mover would eternally contemplate itself. This is basically that. He made himself into the Aristotelian unmoved mover, the eternal contemplator of himself because he's perfect goodness, while everyone else is less.
I just found this while looking this up. Eric von Knut-Leden, The Western Dilemma, Calvin and Rousseau. Apparently, he wrote something on like Calvin and Rousseau was the Western Dilemma. That's something I have to look
Oh,
into.
great.
That
I got
later.
another thing to read.
Apparently,
Oh,
it's a study guide.
Oh, that's interesting.
I need to look into this more, but I just typed. Because I know you wrote a lot about the French Revolution. I was wondering if you had anything on Rousseau, and he apparently has several things on Rousseau. So
I bet, yeah. Tonight. He's this much of a character. Jesus.
Yeah.
That was more than I expected. I hadn't read that last part. I read up to 6 before. I hadn't read past 6. I hadn't read 6 itself. So that was, as much a blow and a surprise to me as it was for you guys. Man, that paragraph from the Confessions that's something else.
No one should be allowed to write Confessions books anymore. Augustine perfected it. No one else should be allowed to write it. You ever read Tolstoy's Confessions? It's
not the same.
Why would he even like? I never got anyone who reads Tolstoy's anything. Don't read Tolstoy's fiction. That's it. Anything that's not his fiction is just terrible.
Didn't he write War and Peace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fiction. Yeah, his fiction is great. War and Peace. Death of Ivan Ilyich is fantastic. Yeah, Death of Ivan Ilyich is fantastic. One of my favorite ones.
It's important to remember, but I believe Tolstoy denounced all his works later. He wrote Anna Karenina, War and Peace. Anna Karenina, I believe, was Dostoevsky's favorite novel. So if you like Dostoevsky, Anna Karenina.
And Ayn Rand's least favorite.
Not surprised. And
if you look into
the life of what did he write?
He wrote Death of Ivan Ilyich. He wrote
Ivan Ilyich. Yeah, David Life of Ivan Denisovich is Solzhenitsyn. It's not Tolstoy. Sorry, I was confused there.
If you look at
they're very Russian names, man. Ivan, Ilya, whatever.
They're all the same.
His anarchist book, The Kingdom of God Within You by Leo Tolstoy. Of course, it has a yellow and black.
But he had like an artistic manifesto which he denounced all the his previous work.
Well, he also went away from his wife and kids and then died at a train station.
Did he?
He was he was getting really, really old, and he hated his life, and he wanted to kill himself, but he didn't want to kill himself, and so
because he was a Christian.
Yeah, so he left all his wife and kids and disappeared in the middle of the night to a train station, waited for a train, and froze to death, and that's how he went out. Yeah, kind of pathetic. He didn't take a lesson from Ivan Ilyich. His own lessons in the ebook of Ivan Ilyich he didn't take to heart.
Again, I think at one point he kind of had the same, not maybe the same, but a different. The same as Mahiton said, that's a mental acrobatics of which only disease is capable. And that might have been it. That's such a good line too. Mahiton has so many good lines here.
I think Tolstoy also challenged a bunch of people to duel just to see if he can kill him.
Okay, that's kind of cool. That's actually like a
he's a character. Tolstoy is a real interesting character, and people don't like. People either talk about his fiction, or only talk about his anarchism stuff. Never really incorporate everything about him. And really, overall, fascinating guy to read up on.
And
I
it's
highly recommend
interesting
everybody look
to
at
note that
Tolstoy.
Mahitan before this, because he's focusing on his life, not much on like what he thought in social contract or whatever. That Rousseau's declamations bore us, but his life is very interesting. So let's take a look at that, because that might actually be of use in study to realize what's going on here in this mind that basically create the father of the modern world, as he calls him at one point, or as he quotes someone calling him. Like, that's actually way more interesting than just reading the social contract. You're probably not going to get much from reading the social contract. It's probably going to read as outdated, like maybe as a work of political theory. Like probably like if you're between the three classical ones, which are Second Treatise of Government by Locke, Social Contract, and Leviathan, you're probably better off reading Leviathan by Hobbes. Like, which is just like a very pessimistic view of humanity. It's way more accurate than whatever Rousseau is talking about.
I mean, this is how he conceives of himself. Like, I mean, he must think everybody else is, like just almost like angels. I mean, he's basically God. Everyone else just must be angels by comparison.
Again, this is the guy who had the noble savage. This is the creator of that idea. Remember, I think I believe Mahitan will later get into it. I don't see how he
rejected private property. He thought that Rousseau thought that private property was like the mother of all evils. Which is funny because he believes in self-ownership. That's where that idea comes from.
Gentlemen, may I read just the next sentence that Mahitan has?
Yes.
It's so good, and it's going to complement this perfectly. So the beginning of part 7, which is just the very first sentence, it's a paragraph in itself. Mimicry of sanctity, changing of the heroic life into a religious enjoyment of self, ambition to reach God and the divine life by sensation and the affective imagination. Is not Jean-Jacques the finest specimen of the naturalist mysticism of feeling? That's really good.
He's fantastic.
But again, which is, I love the little quips he has against the naturalism, subjectivism, idealism.
He's
what was the other one?
It's like what it was. Not only the beautiful writing and like spot on and like brilliant takedowns and explanations, it also has like a petty feel to it almost, where it's just like, what about Nate's? Forget about this. We're not going to do it for dollars.
Yeah, so much for modesty at one point.
It's like he has a very petty way of writing as well, which I really.
It's very French.
Yeah, I love it.
It's very French.
I normally don't like Footsman, but Jacques Maritain gets a pass. Him and
Catholic Frenchmen get a pass.
Yeah,
Catholic Thomistic Frenchmen get a pass.
Lefebvre gets a pass. Charlemagne gets a pass.
That was before France. That was Franks. That wasn't France. It was the Kingdom of the Franks. Different age.
And if you got to the part of they haven't crowned
there is
him
no Frenchman which is 6 foot tall or whatever Charlemagne was. Impossible.
What was the have you got to the part in they haven't crowned him where Lefebvre talks about Jacques Maritain? I know.
We got past that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did he have? Did he have anything interesting to say on him? I don't think.
It was just like I think it's just a one sentence offhand comment, but I can't recall what it was.
Okay. I've been seeing that with so Maritain pop up in a few of the books. Zeke Thurston referenced him as Monsieur Maritain a few times because
Monsieur Maritain, yeah. They lived around the same time.
Yeah. Also, if anyone wants to, I found a book. Apparently, D.K. Chesterton wrote one of his autobiographies of Leo Tolstoy.
Biography.
So
biography. From the perspective of Tolstoy, is it also?
No, sorry, it's a biography, not autobiography.
Oh, okay.
D.K. Chesterton, George Herbert Pierce, and Edward Garnett wrote a treatise from Austro, a biography of Leo Tolstoy. So.
That's interesting. I really like Chesterton. I'm finishing Everlasting Man right now. Man, is he good. He writes like Mahitan, but more English, as you would expect.
Yes, these 20th century thinkers, philosophers, they just a different breed.
And Chesterton, man, is so beautiful. There's so many quotes I can get from when he talks about either the church or Christ. I mean, there's a really rousing one where he says, the Romans thought when they were fighting against the Carthaginians, they knew that they sacrificed children to Moloch. They knew, and that's why they fielded army after army after army after army to fight against this, because they thought that's why Cato was Cartago delenda est. No, destroy this thing, salt it. And he says and I got this conclusion. He says something like the best of the heathens could destroy the worst of the heathens. If now we have the worst of the heathens with things like abortion, let's say, and other such things, then surely even the worst of the Catholics and those who believe in truth can fight against this thing if the best of the heathens could prevail against this. Which is
That's
a
a
very
really good
rousing
point.
moment how he delivers it.
Yeah, we should cover some Chesterton sooner or later. Do some live readings of like eugenics and other evils or something.
I'd love to read some parts of Everlasting Man. There's a few paragraphs which are some like pages which are really, really good. I might do a recorded reading of that. But yeah, gentlemen, do you have any final comments, I suppose?
I'm speechless.
Yeah.
I'm still taking it in. So I almost feel like we're gonna have to continue this on the next reading. Is first off is going to be the debrief from last time. How are you guys holding up? Are you okay? Your egos aren't hurt by Rousseau's greatness.
We'll have to ask Eincap's reaction to this as well. I'm interested to see what he's thought of this.
That dude, he retweeted the link.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
He hops on Twitter, retweets the link, deletes the app again. For the chat. He's probably busy with the kids or something.
Yeah, you were right, Andrew, to like make this Rousseau its own episode instead of Luther and Descartes. Because man, what a piece of work! What a piece of work!
This is the guy who inspired all of Western civilization. I can see it. Yeah, all of liberalism, all of liberal civilization, deciviliization. I can see it. Yeah,
I can definitely see it.
Like you see so much of him everywhere.
Yes,
it's just like everything he is all over the place. I mean, just like growing up, it's like all this. You're perfect the way you are. You don't ever have to change. Peter Pan. You don't have to grow up. And, you could be an orphan. And
honestly, I'll say I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna on my new series, the classics driven live. I'm gonna take Disney films and just critique the fuck out of them. I'm just gonna do Peter Pan and just like critique like all the modern notions the Disney films put out there, how terrible they are for the average person.
Well, I mean, it's occurring to me now, like it's like divorce and war and stuff like that. It's responsible for creating people like Rousseau. People with this kind of mental illness, it's like, this is what abandonment as a child does to kids. So like, if you say, oh yeah, abandoning your kids is fine, or, just, or divorce is okay. It's like, this is the kind of evil it causes. And, it's like, I mean, it's again, it's like the feats of which only mental illness and disease could reach.
Oh, you want to outlaw divorce? Yeah, I don't want another Rousseau. That's the argument.
Yeah, I don't want Rousseau's. Yeah. It's a fantastic argument. So
I'm gonna tweet that at Ace tonight. Just gonna tweet it randomly. Yes, divorce would be illegal. I don't want more Rousseau's. And it's like,
yes,
I'm just gonna mute that thread.
Tweet that.
You should make an Austro Thomism article saying the utilitarian case against divorce, and just one line, no more Rousseau's, and
that would be my article.
Done.
No more Rousseau's.
But man, he abandoned 5 children,
and then write a book on it. I mean, write a book on it.
And concluded that book on it. And it concluded the state would do a better job.
Did abandon
he hated the state.
Like, I cannot believe that, this really feels like God gave him 5 separate instances to make up for all the other evils he had committed, for all his other sins. Like, okay, just take care of his child. Then he said, no. Okay, please, you can take care of his child. No. Okay, they're like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing, Rousseau? 5 separate instances? Like, I don't know, maybe, it's the first one is the hardest one, but do you get I don't even, how do you get desensitized to child abandonment? How do you do it so often? It's a habit.
Well, it's like, I mean,
it's not just a sin, it's a vice. It's vicious. It repeats itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, how do you do it? I can understand doing it the first time. How do you do it a second time? It's like, how do you not recognize that was a mistake?
Yeah. Is there no self-reflection on this? I mean, Rousseau had to know that he wouldn't say it, but he had to know at some point that he was screwed up. At one point, he would confess that he was, possessed of a madness when he was basically accusing David Hume of conspiring to kill him, if you read into it, if I believe correctly, and, charging people against Hume, in turn, trying to turn all his friends against him. And at one point, and later in Mahitan notes that he, Rousseau did say he was possessed of a madness. How do you not, if you have the capability of
Nope, we lost him.
Yeah, we lost him, but I can kind of complete his thought that, like, how do you not have that kind of self-awareness?
Nope. Yes. Yeah.
You cut out for a minute, we need to cut right back in once you start talking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like how do you not have, like, you're just like, oh, I was mentally ill for that, don't take that, I don't take my perfection away from me, never mind my mental illness that made me do the bad thing.
And how do you not regard that mental illness, that craziness, as a result of your own abandonment?
Modern translation of that is, sorry, I'm just a Scorpio.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
yeah, I'm unique amongst all creatures.
Rousseau.
I'm a pure spirit as an angel. Like he is Descartes' angel acting like a beast. That was such a good summary of him.
I'm so glad we covered this book, guys. This is a fantastic one. I just need to get more views. I'm gonna share it everywhere.
That one clip about outlawing divorce, that one.
Yeah.
That one. No, just cut. No, don't tweet it at Ace. Tweet the clip at Ace.
Tweet the clip at Ace. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's never on. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Plugs.
I'll go first. I killed Brown 549 on Twitter, at Austro Thomism on Twitter. Website's back up at austro-thomism.com. Got a lot of great work coming out. Next episode will be Saturday night. We got Confidence Healers coming on. We're going to talk about why everyone on Twitter is so fucking stupid. And then we're going to talk about Protestantism and Descartes. It's going to be.
I'm not sure I'll be over Rousseau by that time.
I know.
Guys, we're terrible. We're not Rousseau.
I'm just going to say, hey guys, if you listen to this, I'm just going to read that paragraph to them.
Yes. Actually, we should open up with that reading.
That's a good idea.
Let's open up with reading that little quote.
Yes.
Have them react to that.
By the way, easy to remember. Page 50.
Page 50. Remember that. We need to open up with that reading.
Okay. That is a brilliant idea. All right.
This is going to be so much fun.
All right. So that was Caleb's plugs. Volkov.
Okay, so I'm a writer at Austro Thomism. I'm working on a review of Wilhelm Röpke's, a Catholic Austrian economist, review of his book, The Humane Economy. Currently going through that. I don't know ETA at the moment. I'm at available username on Twitter, and that's pretty much where you can find me. If I post any videos for the foreseeable future, any recorded stuff, it will be on this channel. So that's my plugs.
Hi, I'm Andrew from Popular Liberty, or I should say Politically Catholic now, and I am better than Rousseau. And you can find me at Popular Liberty _ on Twitter, and which is I go by the name Politically Catholic now, and you can find me at Politically Catholic on YouTube. I'm gonna try to do the part 7 or I should say chapter 7 part 2 of they have uncrowned him. Probably this week or next. Still trying to work out the schedule with the baby, but I'm going to try to do
it's not nice to call LB a baby, man.
No, my co-host LB is amazing. You can find him at LB Muniz.
Get him on one of these.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, we should.
By the way, everyone should add better than Rousseau to their bio.
Yeah.
Yes. You gotta do that, guys. Andy, do you want to plug Mises GOP with the
situation? Yes. Oh, and we have a new link for the GOP Mises Caucus. We are supporting Buck Johnson for office, and we have a link here for Austro Thomism. MisesGOP.org/Catholic. If you want to donate to help restore the social kinship of Jesus Christ, Buck Johnson's gonna be on that eventually, and we're gonna get that done. And that's just one step at a time. I know we're really far away, but we'll get there. Trust me. We got a plan, and it's awesome. So again, MisesGOP.org/Catholic.
Wonderful. Well, guys, another episode of Austro Thomism Roundtable live readings. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and remember, we are all better than Rousseau.